What's up, guys? Scott Fraser over here at Fraser Equipment and Supply. Today we are working on a Bobcat S150 tack plate. That's the attachment plate on the front of the bucket where the bucket attaches to the machine. Everything is worn out. Some things are broken. We're going to take it apart. We're going to get inside it, show you what we replace and how we replace it, and give you some sort of an idea of what's involved in keeping the front end maintenance on these machines the way it's supposed to be. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so this is the front end of the machine where the bucket attaches. So what we have here is a manual machine. This doesn't have the hydraulic cylinder that would go from this point across to this point to do the bucket from in the cab. And then the levers, which are sprung, control the pins down here. These actually lock into the holes in the bucket and keep the bucket on the front of the machine. Now, all of this is a sloppy mess. Everything's worn out over time. Some of the pins get broken inside there. So we're gonna wind up breaking all this down, and we have two brand new kits with brand new bushings. Now, these bushings have to be burned out and welded back in place. That's probably the hardest part of this thing, is getting these bushings cut out and then welded back in place. Now, when you pick these kits up, you have to be aware that there is a right side and there is a left side. Don't leave the dealership or your local parts store with two of one side, or you'll get home and your handles won't match up. All right, so we're gonna tear this thing down and get into it. We'll get you some video of it coming apart, and then we'll talk about putting it back together. So we got our parts off, our handles and our pins. Now what's left in here is the bolt that the handle bolts down on and the bushing. Now these bolts we're going to be able to hammer out, but the bushings themselves are welded in. So here's the bushing, okay, and that's actually sitting like this down inside that steel. So we have to grind all this weld out all the way around, and then knock this one out, put this one back in, get it all welded up, and then we can put it back together. On this side, the bushing actually snapped off of there and rode up on the bolt a little. You can see that bolt is bent and that's all worn out. So again, this bushing is going to go in there just like that, and it's got this slotted end which holds the head of the bolt, which is coming straight up through here. Now the bolt will bang out, but we do have to cut these welds and grind this out in a nice round hole, good enough to slip this new bushing in and get it welded up. Now the parts that came out of there, this locking pin, which is the part that actually goes down into the bucket, this is still fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We're going to clean that up. We'll put it on the shelf. We'll have it as a spare. All the rest of this is scrap metal. We don't try to save any of this. We don't keep any of it. It's all worn out, rusted up. The springs lose their compression. And the handles, if you look at that hole, where's the new one? We'll get a new one over here. And you can see it's just a little worn out. So obviously it was due time for this machine to get a new one. Here's the other side. This one wasn't so bad on the left where the bushing hadn't broken off yet. But again, you can see that hole's not great. So again, these parts we'll throw away. This pin is also good. We'll clean that up, put it on the shelf, and have it as a spare. And then on the other side, we have our new handle, brand new pin, new spring, washer, and bolt to hold the handle down. And then this assembly here with the spring and this lever, part of the lever, and the lock, which has the ear for the hydraulic cylinder, which this machine doesn't have, all has to get put together. The spring goes on here like this, and then this piece slips down onto there, and then it gets bolted in. Now, you can't compress this spring by hand, and there's not enough thread on that bolt when it's all the way in to get it in. So we got a little trick. We're going to put this in the H press and press the spring shut, and then put the bolt in before we can release the press and take it off. And then this is the bolt that's going to come up through the bushing and hold everything together. All right, so we'll get those old bushings cut out. We'll show you how we do that and get the new ones welded in and start putting this back together. Alright, so we've been beating on it and grinding it down. You can see it's just starting to crack out of there. Starting to see the edge now, the shape. So now we're going to try to hit it down and get it to go through that way. And now we got it out. Here's the back end of that piece, punched out of there. And then we have the new bushing. Now that's ready to go in, except it's a little bit of work to do on cleaning that up. We'll get that rounded back out with the die grinder, make that the right shape, get a nice snug fit in there, and we'll get her welded up. All right, so now that we got our hole fixed up and fitting right, this piece is just gonna slip right down in there just like that. Now, it needs to be flush with the bottom of the plate on the inside. So the way we do that is we just spring clamp the piece of angle or piece of flat stock under there, and that just holds it from going down too far. The orientation doesn't matter because the slot that's cut in it is just to hold the head of the bolt from spinning when you tighten everything up. So however it's turned in there, it doesn't affect anything. So now this side's ready for welding. We'll get this welded up and then repeat the process on the other side. Alright, so we got it all welded up. Everything's in and good. Now, the only thing that we need to change is this area right here. We just have to smooth that out, grind that flat, because this angle right here is what locks into the back of the bucket, and I don't want any interference with that little bit of weld right there. But that's usually the case with these machines. We always have to grind that one little section down, make it flat, and then we are good to go. And we're going to do everything the same on the other side, and then we'll bring you back to put it back together. Alright, I figured I'd bring you guys back to show you the other one. All set and ready to be welded. Ground out. We're just going to weld around this and get this one all set up. This one actually, I didn't even need the piece underneath because I cut it so tight it's basically a press fit in there. So it's holding itself in place now. We'll get this welded up, grind this face edge right here so that the bucket doesn't hit the weld, and get the rest of this put back together. Here we are over at the press now. Now, compressing this spring by hand or even with a bench vise is not fun. So what I've learned to do is use this section of a spring compressor and just set it on my plates on the vise, on the press, and then I can actually press this down through the center hole. You could use a big washer if you have one that's strong enough to hold it, and push it down, and then take this piece, it's going to go up like this, and put it in there and get that bolt started into the center of this shaft, and then you should be able to pull this apart, then open your spring compressor flange and pull that piece right through there. And that's the easiest way I found to do it. It takes a couple of seconds versus two guys muscling with it in a vise trying to push that piece on by hand. So let's give it a shot. there we go. All set. Now we just have to tighten this bolt up with a Allen wrench. We'll just put this in the vise, tighten it up, and it's ready to assemble. All right, so we got both of our pieces put together. The springs are compressed. The end bolt is started, but it's not tight. So we're just gonna throw these up in the vise, hit them with the Allen key real quick, and get them locked down. Doesn't take much to hold them in place. All right, get the other one done and get it put together. One thing I forgot to mention about these pieces here is this bolt comes from the factory with a thread locker already on it. So once you tighten it down, that's it. You don't have to worry about putting any Loctite or any thread locker on there when you put it together. All right, so now we're ready for assembly. We got the other side welded up. Both sides are in place. We ground down the face so that those welds don't rub on whatever bucket or attachment is on the front of the machine. So now the first piece we're going to put in is the pin that locks the bucket. This bevel has a bevel cut on the end of it. This bevel is going to face up when you're working on the machine like this. Now, you can't put it in this way because this area right here stops you from getting level with the hole back here. So this has to go in from the back. Just be sure that your angle's facing the right direction. All right, you may have to tap it a little to get it up where it needs to be. Okay, now that's coming through over there. All right, so the other thing we got to go over is on these pieces, clocking them. So you need the hole where the roll pin goes to be in the same line as the, this piece is there for if you have the piston for the power tack on the Bobcat. Now we're not going to use this on this machine, but they come as one piece. So you're going to get this whether you have the power tack or you have a manual machine. So you want this in line with the hole for the roll pin, and it's a lot easier to get this roll pin started from the top into here on your bench before you try to put this onto that pin in the machine. So we'll get these started on both of these, and then we'll be ready to get that together. All right, ready to put it together. Now, when you come over here to the machine, I like to pull these up so you have the steel underneath to bang against. And then we'll get that roll pin going in there. And that's going to line up with this hole for now. We put our handle on that. bolt is going to come up through the bushing that we put in. And then we get our spring, washer, and lock nut. And that's it. Now nothing's going to happen with this piece because we don't have the piston for the power attach. So that is basically it for that one. We'll tighten that down with the wrench. Not super tight because this is on a spring, remember. So we're just going to get it down a couple threads. This is a lock nut, so you want to make sure you get that down. It's destructive, so it's tearing up the threads as it goes down so it doesn't back off on its own. And then everything seems to be working good. No interference, everything's clear. All right. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. So, get this on. Turn it up. Get that on there. Thing. Our handle. Bolt in from the bottom. Spring, washer, and nut. I gotta use my knee to hold the bolt in so I can hold the camera with my other hand. And there we go. Tighten down some. And if you look underneath, you'll see that's how that nut locks into that T-slot that was cut in there we were talking about before. That's why the orientation of that doesn't matter when you weld that in place. It can face any direction. You just want to be sure that it winds up flush and it's not sticking out any, because then it'll hit the bucket and that'll stop you from getting a good connection on the machine. And this one works as it should. Pin slides in and out. Now, we're going to give these a little bit more. Like that. So that's going to come out of the bottom a little bit. You want it to be about even with the other side of this plate here. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. That's it. We're going to throw some grease on these fittings. They're on the side. Now, you want to make sure that you keep these greased up good, because the easier that this slides in and out of here, the less wear that you're putting on everything that we just replaced on this end. So the better that this pin moves in and out of the bucket, the better life you're going to get out of the machine, and the better life you're going to get out of these parts. So make sure you're hitting these fittings anytime you grease your machine, regardless of whether or not you're doing a lot of tool changes, because this will get a lot of dirt built up in it just from falling in there from the top or getting shoved in from the bottom. If you plow snow with them and you deal with salt, you want to keep grease in there to keep salt from corroding everything up, and you'll wind up getting seized. And if you don't take your bucket off for 3 months and then you go to pull these handles up, you won't be able to get them. All right, so that's how we handle that, and we'll see you on the next video.